alone at sea. When I woke, the sun was up, and I found myself about a quarter of a mile off the southwest end of Treasure Island. However, the shore was very rocky and the sea rough, so I could not risk trying to go ashore. I tried to paddle, but the boat was difficult to steer and water started to come in. I felt horribly frightened. How could I hope to reach land? Some time later, as I moved around the coast, I suddenly saw the Hispaniola in front of me, less than half a mile away. Her sails were moving freely in the wind, and it was clear to me that no one was sailing her. I thought that the two men must be asleep from the rum. If only I could get on board, I might be able to return her to her captain. I knew what I needed to do. I sat up and started paddling again. Despite water coming into the boat, I went on paddling until at last I was close to the ship. I could see that one of the booms was hanging out over the side of the ship, and when a large wave came I pushed myself up and reached for it. Israel hands. As I dropped down onto the deck, the ship came into the wind, swung around and nearly threw me back into the sea. I managed to stand up, and then I saw a man lying dead further along the deck. Near him was Israel Hands, sitting against the side of the ship. His eyes were closed and his face was white. I could see blood on the deck and a large cut on his leg. I thought that the two men must have killed each other. At that moment, Israel moved a little and asked me to get him some brandy. I quickly went down to the cabin. It looked terrible and was covered in empty bottles, but I managed to find a little brandy, as well as some biscuits, cheese and raisins for myself. After drinking the brandy, Israel was stronger and asked me where I had come from. "I've come to take the ship," I replied. "And please think of me as your captain." He looked at me but said nothing. Then I pulled down the pirate's black flag and threw it into the sea. I did not trust Israel Hands, but I knew that I could trust him on one point. We both wanted to beach the ship somewhere safe, where she could easily be returned to the sea. Hands offered to tell me how to do it. So, with Hands giving me step-by-step instructions, we brought the ship slowly into the North Inlet. Then he cried, "Now, my boy." And I turned the ship quickly and she started to move towards the shore. While waiting for the ship to beach, I turned to face Hands. When our eyes met, we both cried out. My cry was of fear, because he was now standing and had a knife in his hand. His was a cry of attack. He came towards me, but I ran to the side, pulling one of my pistols out from my belt as I moved. At that moment, the ship ran onto the shore and with a huge and sudden movement, fell over to one side. We both fell down onto the deck, but I jumped up again and started to climb the nearest mast. On getting high up the mast, I stopped to load my two pistols. Hands began to come up the mast after me, and then he stopped climbing and threw his knife at me. Despite the fact that it hit me in the shoulder, I fired both my pistols. Hands cried out and fell into the water below.